Hey everybody, welcome to the Aligned Love Podcast. This is the place where I am going to help you find the one thing that you feel is missing: healthy love. I am your host, Lauren Zoeller, and in this podcast, I will share with you how to attract love, live in alignment, and elevate your deepest relationships. So buckle up, get present, tune into your body, and open up to the possibility that you truly do get to have it all. Let's dive in. Hello, my beautiful friends. Oh my goodness, it has been so long since I have been here and hung out with you guys. As you can see, this is no longer the Balanced Boss podcast, and we have gone through a massive upgrade, and it is now the Aligned Love podcast. And I wanted to hop on this first episode back as a brand new podcast to just talk to all of you about what has been going on over the past couple of years. If you follow me on socials, you know that I no longer live in Nashville, Tennessee. I live in Denver, Colorado, and I am no longer a business coach. And I no longer have the Balanced Boss podcast. I am a totally different woman. And part of that transition of becoming a totally different woman is the reason that I have taken so much time off of one of my favorite things, which is hanging out with you guys and inspiring you and talking to you about what can help you have the life that you truly desire for yourself. And now I'm back and I'm excited to be here. And I want to talk to all of you about the story behind what has been happening over the past couple of years and how I have decided to relaunch this podcast that really is a version of the woman that I am now. The Balanced Boss podcast was so wonderful, and we had so much incredible feedback. There were many of you who listened for years as the podcast launched, and we had life-changing interviews, and I spoke my heart, and so much has changed. So I want to talk about that. And I want to be real with you all. And I want to talk about what the process to getting to where I am now has been. And so let's just go back for a moment and talk about what was happening when the Balanced Boss podcast was alive. What was happening in my life? What was happening in my business? If you followed me back then on Instagram or on any other social platform, or if you just knew me in real life, you knew that I was living what I like to call the epitome of a highlight reel. I was being featured in the New York Times and NBC News. My business was thriving. At that time, when the Balanced Boss podcast was alive, I also had Balanced Boss Academy, where I was teaching other consultants and coaches how to launch and scale their online businesses with heart. And to be honest, it was wildly successful. I had students galore in my Balanced Boss Academy programs. I hired Jess, who is safe to say she's still with me, even in this total deconstruction and reconstruction of the Aligned Love experience and the Aligned Love Collective, and now the Aligned Love podcast. She's still my ride or die. But there was a lot of really beautiful things that were happening when the Balanced Boss podcast was alive in that time in my life. I was very single, navigating the tumultuous dating world, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And truly, that evolution of what happened in the dating world is the reason that the Aligned Love experience and the Aligned Love podcast is here. So much of my deconstruction of myself came through dating and relationships. And truly, if it wasn't for the Balanced Boss podcast and Balanced Boss Academy, I wouldn't be where I am right now in this space, launching a podcast about how you can find and keep healthy love in your life, because that was the catalyst to all of my healing. But back to my story, if you followed me at that time, I was living the epitome of a highlight reel. I had a wildly successful business. I was traveling the world with my so-called friends. And I know you can't see me unless you're watching the video recording, but I'm using friends in air quotes because I don't really talk to any of these people anymore. They were fair weather friends that just really were with me during that season of life. And they were pivotal in that season of life, but they weren't long-term friends. So I was traveling the world with my so-called friends. And I also had my own real life version of a Kindle by my side. If you knew me during that time, I was dating a very beautiful man. He was traveling the world with me. And on the outside, it looked like I was living this glorious life. I even had people I remember at that time come up to me and they would ask me like, gosh, how are you doing it? Like, how are you running this online business and also traveling the world and doing all these wonderful things? And I didn't have an answer for them at that time. And I just was living my life. And of course, I was showing it all on social media and making it look like it was this grand, beautiful thing. And what I want to also say about this point in my life was that I was doing all of the things that we as successful men and women, especially in the coaching and therapy industry, I was doing all of the things that we are taught to do. I remember I had an entire team. I spent so much money on personal development at that time. I think it's massively beneficial. But at that time, I was overspending in a lot of ways. I had a whole team of therapists and coaches. I was reciting my morning affirmations in the mirror every day for 20 minutes without fail. I was reading every personal development book known to man. I had a robust morning routine. I was doing all of the things that we as successful men and women are taught to do to be successful. And, it felt like it was working. I was living a life that felt pretty great, but there was always this little knowing inside of myself that something felt off. And it all came crashing down in a matter of 24 hours. And truly, this was the catalyst. It was after this moment, after this big breakdown, that I decided to close down the Balance Boss podcast and really take a long, hard look at my life and what was going on. But this 24 hours changed everything for me. I'll never forget it. I woke up one morning and I was standing in the mirror reciting my morning affirmations. And I looked down at my phone and I had several missed calls from my Kindle boyfriend, from his mother. And she was calling to let me know that my boyfriend had checked himself into rehab for the 6th time that year. Now, you may be sitting there wondering why I am calling myself a relationship expert. And I was in a relationship with a man who went to rehab 6 times. And I knew about all 6 of those times. And I stayed with him. We'll get to that in a moment. But that news hit me like a ton of bricks. And that wasn't the only call that I received that day. There were 2 other calls that hit me. A few hours later, I got a call from my accountant letting me know that my seemingly booming business was actually 30K in the red. And he had no idea how we were going to crawl out of the hole because I was spending money quicker than we could make it. And it was continuing and we had no way out. And then the 3rd call I received that day was from my doctor calling to let me know that a biopsy I had taken earlier that week had come back as potential cancer. So here I am running this personal development business, teaching people how to have success and live a balanced life. And my life was an absolute shit show. And I can laugh about it now, but in that moment, it was humbling. It was super humbling because everything that I felt like I was working so hard to teach people to not do and to do, it wasn't working. None of it was working. And so that was a big moment for me. That was really my rock bottom moment when I realized that there was a lack of integrity. There was a lack of congruency. There was a lack of something wasn't working. And at that point in time, I couldn't put my finger on it. because I was doing everything that we're taught to do, right? I had a team of therapists. I was immersed in masterminds, and I had coaches, and I was reading all of the books and doing all of the morning routines and reciting the affirmations, and nothing was working. Here I was, my relationship was in the gutter, my health was in the gutter, and my finances and business were all in the gutter. And so that was the moment that I said, wait a second, something has to shift. And that is why the Balance Boss podcast and Balance Boss Academy died, because truly my life inside crumbled. And I look at it now and I know that God and the universe gives you moments, and I'm sure it's not going to be my last moment like that God gives you these moments to show you your next healing path and to really recreate you. And that is exactly what happened. When that all went down, I remember I ran to Chicago. My best friend, Kristen, who you guys are going to hear on the podcast in the next couple of weeks, who you have heard on the Balance Boss podcast. She has been with me through all iterations of Lauren. I ran to her home and she embraced me and made me all the yummy food like she always does. And I remember having a really heartfelt conversation with her about, I just don't know if I'm cut out for this. I don't know what's going on. I don't understand. How could I be doing all of these things and it not work? And I'll never forget, she told me in that conversation, she said, cognitively, you talk about all of this peace that you want to find, and you talk about all these really great things in theory, but I'm curious, how are you feeling in your body? And I realized in that moment, nobody had ever asked me that question before. And when I took some time to think about it, my body was screaming. It didn't feel safe. It didn't feel calm. It didn't feel peaceful. And I knew in that moment that there was something there. I needed to go deeper.
Are you a high-achieving woman who is tired of swiping left and right, hoping to find the love of your life? Are you ready to break free from toxic relationships and finally create a deep, lasting connection with someone who truly aligns with your heart and soul? Well, I want to introduce you to the Align Love Collective, a transformative 6-month coaching container designed to help you find your soulmate without sacrificing your career or wasting any more time on the dating apps. In the Align Love Collective, you'll embark on a journey of self-discovery and personal growth. Our team of expert coaches and therapists will guide you through a proven process to discover the root of what's keeping you from finding your soulmate. Understand how to get your nervous system in alignment with what you desire. Then watch it all unfold as you implement the roadmap that will lead you straight into the arms of the one you love. But that's not all. When you join the Align Love Collective, you become a part of a supportive community of like-minded individuals, all on their own journeys to finding the love that aligns with their deepest desires. You'll receive ongoing support through live coaching sessions and exclusive resources to help you every step of the way. Plus, you'll gain access to guest experts to ensure that you have the tools that you need for success. Don't settle for anything less than the love you deserve. Join the Align Love Collective and discover the path to a healthy, lasting love. If you want to learn more, visit my website at www.laurenzoeller.com/soulmate, SOULMATE, to learn more. The Align Love Collective, where love and alignment go hand in hand.
So she had just so happened to start stumbling her way into somatic therapy and somatic experiencing. And she was working at that time with a somatic practitioner. She said, maybe you should look at this. Maybe you should start to navigate down this alley and see what happens. And so I decided, out of the grace of God, because I was so sick and tired of therapists that weren't working for me and coaches and all of this mindset work, that I would set up a session with a somatic therapist, a somatic practitioner. And I did. And I remember coming out of that session feeling like, you know what? I feel peace in my body for the first time in a really long time. And I don't know what this is, but I'm just going to keep following this. And so I started committing myself to the work. and I started seeing a somatic practitioner, and I started doing the nervous system work. And slowly but surely, I started to unpack what was underneath my scarcity behaviors and my need to date alcoholics because I felt like I could save them, and my need to not take care of my health and starve myself and overexercise because I felt like I needed to look a certain way. And I started to understand that all of these patterns and all of these behaviors were all rooted in survival. They were rooted in these deep survival patterns that were keeping me from being able to feel safe in relationship with myself, but also in relationship to another human. And so just through understanding this work, I decided, wait a second, there's something to this. There's something to this healing puzzle that I have missed. And I'm going to dedicate myself now to being a student of love and a student of understanding my nervous system. And so I decided to dive in fully, and I committed myself to the somatic work. And I decided to go back and become a certified somatic practitioner, somatic therapist through the Somatic Experiencing Institute. And I started to do the real work, the nervous system work. And the result of that was that I started to reconnect to me. And I started to understand that the piece that was missing for so long was the cognitive piece. It wasn't reciting more affirmations. It wasn't adding more to my morning routine. It wasn't hiring another coach or another therapist. It was working with my practitioner to truly understand safety in my body. Once I was able to get there, everything in my life shifted. I started to completely change the way that I viewed my health, and the way that I viewed my finances, and the way I viewed my business, and the way that I viewed my relationship to myself and to others. And the result of that work was that I eradicated my cancer scare. I took my business from 30K in debt to making 30K in 1 month. And it just continued to go up from there. And I found my first healthy partnership in my 30s. And now I live in Denver, Colorado with the man of my dreams, truly. He is so safe and secure and loving. And I've changed and shifted so much. And so that is the evolving of what has happened over that time. And the Align Love experience and the Align Love collective truly is the exact path that I went through to be able to find that sense of safety and love for myself and be able to attract a really safe partner. You know, I think what's really interesting, and I'll go more into this story probably in later podcasts, but what I think is so interesting is that when I was doing this somatic work, I recognized that, I grew up in a long line of Polish women. And if you don't know anything about Polish women, they are very selfless. I was taught at a very young age that you do not get to sit down and eat your food until everyone else has eaten their food first. And while many people can say that's a really great quality, what most people don't understand is that Polish women are that way because they needed to survive. And I'll give you an example. My great-grandmother came over here from Poland. And when she got over here, her husband told her, you just need to be accepted. You just need to be liked. Do whatever you need to do. We need to be a part of this community now. We need to be liked and accepted. And so this pattern of taking care of others, even when others can't take care of themselves at the expense of yourself, became the way that my great-grandmother survived. But here's the kicker with that. It was also the way that my grandmother learned to receive love and survive. And it was also the way that my aunts and my mother learned to receive love and survive. And so naturally, it was also the way that I was taught. Now, the difference is that I don't need to survive. But yet that was what was conditioned in my nervous system, this heightened fawn response, which the more that you listen to this podcast, I'm going to dive really deep into somatics, but this heightened fawn response, that it's the people-pleasing response inside of me, was such a familiar pattern because it had been passed down generationally to me. So of course I was attracting alcoholics. What I left out of the story is that this was not the first alcoholic that I dated, or the second, or the third. It was the fourth alcoholic in a row that I had dated. And I was attracted to alcoholics because my nervous system felt familiar in the pattern of saving someone, even if they're unable to save themselves. So you see, I was no different than the alcoholic. He would go to the booze to get a hit of validation. I would go to saving him to get a hit of validation. There was a part of me, a sick part of me, and I say sick, it's not sick. It was a survival mechanism that felt a sense of love and belonging when he would need to go to rehab, and I could be there when he got out to support him. And so the reason I'm telling this story is that there are so many of these survival patterns in our bodies that, and again, in our bodies, not in our mind. Cognitively, I knew that this alcoholic was bad for me, that I shouldn't be in this partnership, but my body still felt familiar in that dynamic. And that is what I needed to heal. And I had those similar dynamics with money and my health. And so unpacking all of that got me to a space of safety. And when I was able to get to security and safety in my body, that is when I started to attract money and a secure partner and really beautiful health with ease, because I did the somatic work. And so that long-winded story is all here to show you why this podcast is being reborn. I am being reborn. I have been reborn. My programs have been reborn and rebuilt. We have helped now several men and women, and when I say several, hundreds, find and keep healthy love. We have women that have gone through my programs now that are married and have babies. Jess is a beautiful example of this. She went through the collective and we just had our very first Align Love baby, which I just love and adore. And so I know that this work is not just the work that changed my life. It's also changing hundreds and thousands of others' lives out there too. And so the Align Love podcast is here to give you a behind the scenes look at that healing process, to really help you elevate your deepest relationships, find alignment and deep love if you're in the space of looking for that in your life. And this has gone so far now that we now have I have built a certification program. It's called the Trauma Informed Relational Somatics Facilitator Program, where we're teaching attachment theory and somatics and teaching people how they can start to facilitate this in their own practices as therapists and coaches and healers, because I do believe there's such a disconnect in the world between traditional talk therapy and somatic experiencing and somatic therapy. It was the missing piece for me. And if you understand that healing is a two-part puzzle, it's 20% cognitive and 80% in the body, the nervous system. And if you can attack both of those angles with the right team, the life that you desire for yourself is so possible. And I plan on shedding a light into that process through the Align Love podcast. So that's a little bit about the transformation and why this podcast is being reborn. I'm a new person. I am reborn. And I hope that if you're listening to this right now, it's giving you hope that you too can be reborn. And that maybe somatics is the missing piece for you. And if it is, keep absorbing this podcast. Take it all in. We're going to be talking about so much, but I want you to know that the focus is going to be elevating relationships. And when I say relationships, I'm not just talking about romantic relationships or platonic relationships. I'm talking about the relationship to yourself. Because if you know safety in your own body, and you know how to speak that language, and you also know how to speak the language of survival and dysregulation when it's happening, you are now in control of your life versus your life being in control of you. And so if you haven't done the work to really understand your nervous system, buckle up, because we're going to be talking about it a lot in this podcast. We're going to be talking about relationships. I'm going to be interviewing Sean. You're going to get to hear from him, who's my significant other. the reason that I moved to Denver. You're going to be getting to hear from some of the women who've gone through this work with me. I'm going to be interviewing expert guests all about deepening that love for yourself and deepening your most intimate relationships. So get excited. It is a new Reborn podcast. I am so freaking excited to have you here and to be back on the mic, to be inspiring you and speaking to you. And I want you to know that if you're here, you are a part of my family. And I say that all the time. If you're in our programs, if you follow me on socials, if you listen to this podcast, if you come to any of my events and see me speak, or you've been to my retreats, you are family. And I do not take that lightly, because I want you to know that you are loved here and you are safe here. So please, 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 if this feels like it's the podcast for you and you want to continue to listen in every week, by all means, save it, share it with your friends, and know that this is going to be a wild journey together. And I'm so grateful to have you on board.
That wraps up today's episode of the Aligned Love podcast. One thing that would really help me and the other new potential listeners is for you to rate this show and leave a comment wherever you tune in and listen. Also, make sure to link up with me on Instagram at Lauren Zoeller, and please share this podcast with anyone who you think may enjoy it. Until next episode, remember, every transformation begins with one moment of awareness, and I hope today has been yours. I'll see you next time.